Today we are looking at a shift that can feel surprising the first time you encounter it. Art that refuses to tell a story, refuses to show emotion in obvious ways, and sometimes even refuses the artist's visible hand. Minimalism in the 1960s reduces form to clear structure and asks you to experience art as an object in your space, not as an image of something else. Post-minimalism, a few years later, keeps some of that clarity but brings back the body, instability, and process. Materials that sag, bend, leak, and they are vulnerable. The image on this opening slide is Donald Judd's work in 1969. Notice how it looks. Industrial, repeatable, like something that could be manufactured. Judd wanted that. He wanted the artwork to exist with the directness of the real thing. As we go, keep one big question in mind. If the work is just an object and something that artists don't even physically build, does it make it look like art or be art? So by the end of this lecture, you should be able to do three things. First, identify how industrial materials, factory fabrication replaces the traditional idea of the artist's hand. In other words, why would an artist choose to have a work fabricated by others, using industrial processes rather than making it personally? Second, describe a major shift in viewing. Instead of seeing art as an illusion or a picture, you experience it as an object in the real space. You don't just look, you move, you measure, and you sense everything around you. Third, think about comparing minimalism's rigid system, its clean geometric repetition, with post-minimalism. More bodily, organic approaches where gravity, softness, chances, and time can determine the form. So let's define our terms. Minimalism in the 1960s is art that reduces form to clear, often geometric structures, emphasizes the literal presence of an object in real spaces. Instead of illusion, narratives, or symbolism, we get industrial materials, simple forms, through repetition, sometimes called seriality. Post-minimalism from the late 1960s to 1970s grows out of minimalism, but introduces processes, contingency, and bodily associations. The key idea is that material behaves. Flexible materials bend, gravity pulls, surface are aging. Form can feel unstable. The near terms on the slide are worth nothing because they show what was being debated at the time. They show the idea of being specific object, objecthood, seriality, systems, and later antiform, process. The image here by Carl Andre, the equivalent 8, VIII, it means in Latin 8. A word that looks extremely simple, yet it becomes complex because it changes how you use the space around you. This theme matters because minimalism changes the basic question we ask. Instead of asking, what does it represent? Minimalism asks what it does to the space. That shift moves from interpretation as decoding symbolism to interpretation as describing an experience. So repetition is also crucial. When something repeats, you start noticing differences, the spacing, the rhythm, the way your body moves along a sequence. Minimalist trains you for attention. It slows you down and makes you notice what you might usually ignore. Spacing, rhythm, and how your own body navigates a room or a space. And materials become meaning, like metal, plywood, brick, rubber, lead. They're all not disguised or disguised in this thing. They just carry association, its industry, labor, weight, construction, and the reality, or ever building an environment. Finally, the viewer's body becomes part of the work. Looking becomes walking, measuring, and sensing. In a way, minimalist art completes itself in your own perception and movement. So here at slide number 5, doing 5 terms to keep in mind. Specific object, a constructed thing that is neither traditional painting nor traditional sculpture. It's made to engage real space directly. Seriality, repetition of units in a sequence, where spacing and small variations shape meaning. Seriality creates rhythm, like beats in music or steps in architecture. Let's talk about industrial fabrication. Having the work manufactured by factory workers and machines rather than handmade by artists. That reduces personal gesture and highlights structure and finish. Site-specific, made from and for dependent particular locations. If you move it, you change the whole thing. In minimalism, placement and light often matter as an object. Let's talk about anti-form and process. A post-minimalist approach that allows gravity, chance, and material behavior to determine the form. Here the artwork can feel like an event, not a fixed object. We'll use our familiar four-step method, but with a minimalist twist. First, describe. What are the literal materials you see? Is it wood, steel, plexiglass? Are they shiny, rough, reflecting, translucent? Second, analysis. How do spacing, edges, and surfaces guide your eye and body? Are you invited to stand where you are blocked? Does the world pull you to walk around it or look down to it? Third, picture the 1960s and 1970s. Mass production, industrial growth, modern architecture, new gallery spaces, especially large wide rooms that can function almost like a laboratory for looking. And fourth, interpret. If the work is just an object, what changes in you? Your attention, your tension, your sense of orientation, your patience, those changes become part of the meaning. Here is our guiding question. If an artist doesn't physically build the object and it contains no hidden emotional symbols, what makes the art looks like art? This question lands right at the center of minimalism. It forces us to rethink authorship, craft, and expression. Look at the image. This is the Richard Serra 1-ton prop house of cards. 4 heavy metal plates lean into each other. Nothing here is illustrated. The drama is physical in the weight, the gravity, balance, and the risk of it. So, one answer to the guiding question is this. Art can be an experience engineered through materials, scales, and space. The meaning can be generated through what that object makes your body and mind do. So let's focus on our anchor artist, Donald Judd. Why Judd matters? Because he helped define the minimalism by rejecting illusion and traditional composition. He believed an artwork should simply exist as a little object in a space. He also embraced the industrial fabrication. By having work made in factories, he removed the visible handmade expression that had dominated early modern art. The choice pushes attention towards structure, proportion, finish, and placement. The key identifiers to remember him: boxes, modules, often repeated, industrial materials paired with precise color, including plexiglass and clear spacing, where the interval between units is part of the work. So let's look at the quotation that it's on the screen. It is clear statement of Judd's position. Actual space is intrinsically more powerful and specific than paint on any flat surface. For Judd, a painting inevitably creates illusion. Paint can suggest depth, atmosphere, imaginary spaces. Judd wanted none of that. The takeaway of the slide is essential. Minimalism treats space and viewing as materials. In other words, the artwork is not only the object, it's also the air around, the light on it, and your movement in relation to it. So, when you study minimalism, it helps to treat yourself as part of the medium. Your position, your height, your pace, even whether you are hurried or patient, doesn't matter. Changes what the work becomes of it. A short biography helps us to see how deliberate this shift was. Judd was born in Missouri and studied philosophy and art history at Columbia University, New York. The background matters because he approached art with a philosophical insistence on clarity. He began as a painter, but abandoned painting because he felt that canvas always produced an illusion of space. He wanted the real thing, the physical space. His media was strictly industrial: steel, concrete, plexiglass, often ordered directly from factories. In 1965, he wrote a very important thing: Specific Objects, a foundational essay for minimalist art. And later in his career, he built long-term installation and advocated for careful placement and light, showing that minimalism is not cold so much as extreme attentive. This slide gives you a 4 signature method that will help you recognize Judd's work. First, industrial fabrication. The goal is to remove gesture and emphasize precision and finish. The second, standard units and repetition. Repetition makes rhythm and space visible. Then the third one is material. As through plexiglass, color is not painted, it is not into the material's tiny tinting of the light or making the space feel subtle flavor. And fourth, placement and intervals. The work is partly in the air between parts. The interval is not empty, it is constructed. So What does this work do? It makes light and color act like a physical material inside a simple structure. The color is not on the surface, it's in the space. What to notice? First, the industrial material suggests fabrication and clarity. There is no attempt to disguise what this is. Second, transparency. The box is empathetically there, yet light passes through and it changes it. The work is solid, but it also behaves like a filter. And third, 4 units read as a sequence. The space creates a rhythm almost like a musical beat. And finally, your lived bodily experience. If you were standing in front of it, the work would change as you talk. Color shifts with positions, reflection changes, and you suddenly notice the room itself, its light, its walls, even the distance you're keeping from the objects. This slide shows a major long-term installation at Cincinnati Foundation. Chad created 100 units in mill aluminum, each large, each precisely made. The number alone matters. This is not a single masterpiece, but a system. The installation is also about the site, the architecture, the Texas light, and the space between units are all part of the experience. Here, minimalism approaches something like architecture. You don't simply look at one object and you enter the field of repeated forms. What does this installation do? It creates endless variation within a strictly controlled system. Notice key facts on the slide. The outer dimensions of all 100 boxes are identical, but the interior planes and angles are uniquely different in each one. That combination, sameness and difference, is fundamental to seriality. You start by recognizing a repeated unit and then you begin noticing variations. Also notice the role of light. As the sun moves, reflection, change, and your bodily experience of the room changes too. The meaning is not inside any single box. It merges through time, movement, and perception. Here we see the difference in materials. It's plywood. This work consists of 6 large units with 12 inches intervals, creating an extended horizontal row. Plywood is significant because it brings minimalism into dialogue with construction and warmth. It's still industrial in a sense, standardized, fabricated, it has grain and a sense of building. At this scale, the work starts to feel architectural. You don't see boxes, you see spaces. What does this work do? It turns simple wood units into walkable measured space. Notice the scale. The units approach architecture. You feel them as spaces, not objects. Notice the material shift. Plywood introduces warm and visible grain. It suggests construction rather than slick manufacture objects. Notice seriality again. Repetition becomes environment. Your movement activates the row. Your experience it is as duration. And this is a perfect example of the specific object. It is neither sculpture nor architecture, yet occupies both. It's a constructed present that changes how you inhabit that room. This slide gives us 3 claims, 3 mini thesis statements you can use in your discussion or in the quiz answer. First, the viewer completes the work. Meaning doesn't exist hidden inside the object. Meaning is generated through your lived experience, how you move around the object in the room. Second, form follows material. Materials are never disguised. Brass looks like brass, plexiglass looks like plexiglass. There's no paint used to create illusions. And third, seriality removes hierarchy. By repeating identical units, there is no single focal point or climax. If every inch is equally important, which changes how we look. Instead of hunting for the paint part, you notice the rhythm and relation. Now we expand out from Judd to four artists who push the theme in different directions. Carl Andre focuses on the floor, radical reduction to flat, literal planes you can walk on. Sol LeWitt focuses on the idea, instructions, grids, and systems, where the concept becomes the machine that makes the art. Eva Hesse focuses on the body, post-minimalism, that invades rigid systems with softness, irregularity, and vulnerability. Richard Serra focuses on weight, post-minimalism, where gravity, balance, and physical threat becomes central. Together, these artists show that minimalism is not one style, but a set of questions about form, repetition, and materials. Carl Andre redefines sculpture as placement rather than carving or modeling. His background matters too. He worked as a railway brakeman, and he brings the logic of industrial stacking and train tracks into sculpture. Units placed, aligned, and repeated. His connection to the theme is a radical reduction. He moves sculpture to horizontal planes without pedestals. And his connection to Judd is clear: repetition and industrial materials. But Andre removes the pedestal entirely and makes the floor the site. So a key term here is literalism. A brick is just a brick. The work refuses metaphor, yet can still feel charged. This is Andre's most famous and most debated artwork. Equivalent number 8, 1966. There are 120 standard fire bricks arranged in a low, flat rectangle. One reason it's debated is public response. When a version entered a major museum collection, many people openly questioned whether it was real art or simply a pile of bricks. The debate is part of the work's afterlife, and it points straight to minimalism's challenge to traditional expectations in the arts. So start with description. Identical factory bricks, no carving, no modeling. Also notice there are no adhesives. The bricks are stacked, not glued, mortared, resin, nothing like that. The structure is ordinary, almost anti-monumental. Now notice the experience. The viewer is forced to look down, not up, down, to share floor space with the object. It disrupts the gallery's normal hierarchy structure, where art is elevated and we stand at a respectful distance. Originally, viewers were allowed to walk on it. Even when you are not allowed to, your body still imagines that possibility. That imagine use becomes part of what the work does. Sol LeWitt pushes repetition into the realm of the concept. He believed that concept itself was the artwork, not the final physical object. That's why he becomes central to conceptual art. His connection to our theme is that he takes seriality and grids to mathematical extremes. Repetition becomes a system. His connection to Judd is clarity and structure, but the emphasis shifts from object to rules. So the key term to remember here is system or instruction-based art. LeWitt's famous line is that the idea that machine it makes the art. In other words, the artwork can exist as a set of instruction rules. Different people can execute it. This work looks like a three-dimensional grid or diagram. Notice the grid logic. It reads as a structure you could almost map or measure. Notice seriality. Unit-based repetition suggests endless extension, as if the piece could keep growing beyond the room. And notice the viewing. You don't understand it from one frontal viewpoint. You understand it by moving around from it is never enough. An interpretation of this artwork. Lewitt turns sculpture into a physical demonstration of a system. The work is not about personal expression, it is about how an idea can generate form. Eva Hesse is one of the most important figures in post-minimalism. She is German-born, became an American sculptor who injected organic chaos and psychological intensity into the minimalist call logic. Her connection to our theme is that she uses repetition, but with pliable, impermanent, bubbly materials, latex, fiberglass, strings. Her connection to Judd is almost a critique against rigid, perfect factory boxes. Hesse offers messy, handmade, vulnerable objects. So the key terms to remember is anti-form and process. Form emerges from material behavior instead of controlling the material completely. She lets it speak through sagging, irregularity, and touch. This work consists of 19 repeated units, but it's repetition with difference. No two units are identical, so the viewer's attention shifts from counting the same thing to noticing small deviations. Notice the surface. It reads as touch and imperfect, vulnerable. The work feels human, even though it uses industrial gentle materials like fiberglass and resins. And notice the sense of process. The placement can feel provisional, as if the arrangement could change. Repetition becomes a living system rather than a fixed grid. So, interpretation of her work here, Hesse keeps minimalism's seriality, but she returns emotions through material behavior, fragility, irregularity, and time. Richard Serra focuses on force. He works in steel mills, and his art often centers on gravity, tension, and physical threat of the industrial materials. His connection to the theme is that he makes force visible: weight, balance, risk, body tension. I personally felt really scared when I saw his permanent installation in the Guggenheim in Bilbao, Spain. But like Judd, he uses industrial materials and clarity, but he adds drama. With Sarah, your body often feels the work before your mind explains it. So the key term to remember here is gravity as structure. Form is held by the mass and the counterforce of the materials. This is a classic Sarah work. Four heavy plates lean into one another to form a precarious square enclosure. A quick safety note matters here. The tension you feel is real. The piece depends on actual weight and balance. So, institutions treated with strict safety protocols and clear boundaries, you are meant to sense the risk and the gravity, but not to test them. Also, notice the balance. The stability is real, not symbolic. Your body senses risk because you know physically what weight can do. Notice the weight. Mass becomes a fact you imagine with your muscles. You almost feel the effort it would take to move one plate. Notice the space. The void inside the house feels charged. It's empty but not neutral. It feels tense and unstable. Sarah turns culture into a confrontation with physical laws. Meaning is produced by your bodily awareness of gravity, danger, and containment. So let's summarize the 5 approaches across our anchor and expansion artists. Donald Judd, specific object, serial modules, and measure intervals in real space. Carl Andre, arrangement, the floor as a site, sculpture as a field of units. Solar Wit, systems, rules, grids, permutation, repetition is idea-based. Eva Hesse, anti-form, repetition with vulnerability, irregularity, and process. Richard Serra, force, weight, gravity, balance, materials, experience as bodily tension. So this chart is useful because it shows you how a single theme, form, repetition, materials, can produce very different outcomes in the art world. So use this slide as a study guide. Note the vocabulary, specific object, seriality, industrial fabrication, site-specific, anti-form, process. Now the theme claims. Form follows material. The viewer completes the work through lived bodily experience. Seriality removes hierarchy. Now the Judd facts. Donald Judd is a key minimalist. He wrote Specific Object Essay in 1965. He used industrial fabrication, modular repetition, and measured intervals. And remember Judd's identifiers, boxes or modules, industrial materials paired with plexiglass collars, and intervals and spacing treated as structure. So a strong way to prepare for the quiz is to choose one artwork and explain its using, one vocabulary term, one theme claim, and two pieces of visual evidence. So use this slide to practice quick recognition. For Judd, the 1969 aluminum and book plexiglass units, the Cincinnati installation with 100 aluminum boxes, and the 1973 plywood row of 6 units. For the expansion artist, Andre's low rectangle of fire bricks, Lewitt grid like serial project, Hesse repeated but irregular fiberglass vessels, and then Serra leaning heavy plates forming a 10 square. So when you identify an image, practice adding one quick sentence of interpretation. What does it do in space? What does the material contribute to that experience? This final slide list of images and sources is the supporting context for your project. For this course, the key habit is using reliable museum and collection pages for the object facts, like title, date, materials, dimension, location. Then you build your analysis on top of the factual foundation. That concludes theme number 3, minimalism and post-minimalism. In the next module, we'll keep practicing the same method. Describe, analyze, contextualize, interpret, while moving into themes where light and perception become the primary materials. Looking forward to that. Thank you.